King Charles has put out an Easter message, and once again, I'm afraid it has been a fairly poorly thought through.
Charles III, as the King of the United Kingdom, is the head of the Church of England and the defender of the faith. And he is defending the faith. The problem is it's just not the faith that the Church of England believes in.
Recently, religion has found its way back into the fertile minds of children. This time, a little girl asked King Charles about Jesus, and everyone was taken aback, including the king, who wore a surprised stare, almost like he couldn't believe what he had just heard. But just how did he respond to this curious little girl? What exactly are the monarch's thoughts on Christianity? Join us as we discuss King Charles's heartwarming response to the inquisitive little girl's question about Jesus. A curious journey to Buckingham Palace. Great Britain, being a place of rich history, particularly in terms of colonization and religion, makes it a destination of intense interest to foreigners and tourists alike. It is no news that celebrities and even school groups, from all grades, have it on their bucket list to go inside Britain's seat of power and walk in the same place as royalty. While these visits aren't entirely unheard of, Buckingham Palace did not grant exclusive access until the inaugural Schools Week, which took place between April 2022 and March 2023. According to reports, approximately 2,000 pupils were given exclusive access to the deepest parts of the palace, marking a new age in the open exploration of Buckingham Palace. It was an unbelievable scenario for most schools in the United Kingdom. Hence, it was no surprise that they tried to make the most of the situation, with pupils coming from as far away as Norfolk, Birmingham, and Staffordshire, as well as Kent, Berkshire, and Greater London. The palace officials figured it was the perfect time to create a coronation-themed experience. With the passing of the Queen,
a few moments ago, Buckingham Palace announced the death of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II.
And the coronation of King Charles in 2023, providing the ideal subtext to enhance the atmosphere. Soon, the black gates of Buckingham Palace were opened, and the school groups trooped in en masse. The groups were reportedly taken into the palace via the visitor route, allowing them to learn more about past and recent coronations. Additionally, they were taken through the King's Gallery, where paintings from the royal collection were made available for the children to see, providing them with a pictorial glimpse into the rich history of the British royal court. Children, reportedly, saw with their own eyes the robes and historic items used in the coronation of their majesties, old and new, and they marveled at this experience, as it was nothing like they had ever seen. Their expression of joy and continuous wows at the sight before their very eyes trumped the repeated visits to the zoo, seeing a hippopotamus or a baboon. This was an exclusive guide into the rich tapestry of British history, accompanied by some stories of the several royal courts from the past, including the Tudor court and more. There was a noticeable number of kids who enjoyed every history they could find in the palace, including comments from a 16-year-old kid named Marcel, who discussed just how much he loved his experience at the palace, while basking in the privilege and honor of walking through the same halls as the royal family. However, there was one little girl who seemed quite different from everyone else. She was quieter and seemed more like someone who took it all in and anticipated a window of opportunity to ask someone about something she had seen. In a place where most kids got lost in the rich history of the British coronation, why was this little girl so different? A royal stroll interrupted. While the little girl stared forlornly at the hopeless painting on the wall, lost in a self-spun web of deep, intense thoughts, she caught sight of King Charles, out of the corner of her eye. It was a lovely afternoon. The sun was out, and the septuagenarian king thought it was a wise time to take a little stroll, flanked by minimal security, around the palace. It's his palace after all, and no one could stop him, or at least so His Majesty thought. While he walked quietly through the halls, which he had walked all his life, his feather-light footsteps and royal aura filled the room, and everyone in there just could tell that the king was coming. Hence, as expected, the little school groups rushed their way to his path, with some coordination and respect afforded to His Majesty. As the students surrounded him in smiles and sincere anticipation for a response, they received the classic royal family response to citizen love, a huge smile that read, "Thank you," and a wave to match it. It was a routine as old as time, and it always worked, and that moment wasn't going to be an exception either. After the classic smile and wave were done, and these mini school groups were starting to disband, forming mini friend groups among themselves, this little girl remained on her own, staring now at the king with a purposeful eye that asked questions that needed immediate answers, else they run down her mind and have her chasing shadows. The sensitive septuagenarian then reportedly asks his minimal security detail to go around the corners of the hall, as he had picked up a genuine interest in this mysterious little girl with a face that demanded answers, even though she wasn't even sure what the questions were. However, one thing was certain. She was sure of the British family's ties to the church, as she had just literally walked down memory lane with other students in her school group, learning all there was to know about the coronations and the church's involvement. Seeing the king looking at her and finding the words to say to her, she curtsied first, paying her respects to His Majesty, who was caught by surprise that a little girl from a school group understood the manners of courtly behavior and acted accordingly without any form of push or visible encouragement to do so. The king, as expected, responded in kind, and just like that, the beginning of a conversation was established between this mysterious little girl and the King of Britain. What exactly does she ask him about? The conversation about Jesus. Watching this child struggle to leave her curiosity behind and follow her school group to the open grounds of Buckingham Palace fascinated the king, who watched her with surprise and perhaps a hint of nostalgia, as she somewhat reminded him of his younger self. King Charles was never one to follow the crowd either, but he was born as royalty, so it could be chalked up to that. However, this little girl was just another lad who wanted a shot at a conversation with the king, picking his brain about religion, especially Christianity.
Christianity is true because of the evidence of the resurrection of Christ. The Bible says that if Christ didn't rise from the dead, our faith would literally be in vain. There'll be nothing.
She had taken a guided tour of Buckingham Palace, and rather than just looking at all the history, she had questions of her own, and she wasn't letting it go. But the main question is, why not ask the tour guide her question? Why pick the king instead? Further investigation into the rationale makes the choice as simple as possible. Who better to ask a question about Christ than a man who reportedly got fragments of the cross of Christ from the Pope? First, both parties sat in silence as she watched the old king, who was signaling to his minimal security detail about some instruction she was too young to understand anyway. Still, it wasn't long before she broke the silence with a, "I have a question." The king's eyes lit up like a Christmas tree, expressing how happy he was to be right about the little girl having some weight on her shoulders and that he was about to unburden her. He looked at her as if to tell her she could go on with her question. While the halls of Buckingham Palace rumbled with heavy footsteps coming from the approaching horde of students, the little girl paused until they had finally passed by. This time, her thoughts were collected and she could finally ask the anticipated question. She looked at her feet and her nails, staring up and down as she thought about the best way to phrase her question. The king was patient with her. After all, she was simply a curious child, looking for answers. He smiled at her, as if to assure her to take as much time as she needed to process her question. Finally, the words came out tumbling in a low whisper. "Do you think Jesus is real?" she asked. King Charles was delighted that she had finally opened up her mind to the possibilities of talking to the king about a topic as heavy as religion. First, he applauded her for her courage and ability to stand firm, despite having peers her age who were more focused on other things. Consequently, he gave a warm response. At first, it was a simple yes, which could have sufficed for an adult. But knowing that she needed a bit more explanation as a child, he told her that Jesus was just as real as they are, with a smile on his and the little girl's face. While Charles was gracious as a king with the little girl, what exactly is his position on religion and spirituality? King Charles and religion. While the Celtic history of dear old England dates the influence of Christianity to the Roman invasion in 43 CE, not everyone in the United Kingdom practices the religion or any other faith. However, just like the former kings of the United Kingdom, King Charles is also a practicing Christian, devout if you will, but his thoughts on religion and spirituality sometimes throw everyone off, and no one can really tell where his heart lies. But one thing is certain with the king. Although he is a man of faith, mostly Christian, he also saw the need for retaining the diversity of religion in the United Kingdom, which is one of the few things they have always been known for. That, of course, didn't sit well with some of the religious extremists in the United Kingdom.
This issue of far-right extremism and the many different ways in which it's threatening our communities is a major concern to the whole church.
Who had one idea and one alone. One religion or none at all. Anyway, Charles was about to be crowned King of the United Kingdom in 2023, and it was reportedly going to be a deeply Christian affair. However, questions lingered about King Charles's take on religion. He has often been seen to defend all faiths, including Buddhism, Islam, and Christianity. In contrast with Queen Elizabeth's coronation in 1953, the United Kingdom was predominantly Christian, and woke culture wasn't a thing. Sunday church attendance was standard procedure, and children were taught to say grace before eating and also prayed before going to bed at night. Hence, there was rarely a need for diversification of religion to avoid backlash from the media or the world at large. Opinion polls in the 50s and 60s had 90% validation of the Christian population, as they were the majority in England at the time. However, in contrast to the different opinion polls between 2022 and 2023, less than 1% of the population of England was going to church on Sundays, with atheism and people with different religions starting to gain a hold on the population of the most Christian-dominant country during the 50s. However, it wasn't much of a disturbance to the practices of old, as the conventional due process would be followed. Hence, as it has been common practice for the last 500 years, King Charles was crowned with the titles of Defender of the Faith and Supreme Governor of the Church of England.
King Charles wants a diverse coronation ceremony, and so he's been pushing for the Church of England to allow representatives of other faiths, Muslims and Hindus, to pray to their gods during his coronation service.
During the coronation, he swore to uphold the laws of God and the true profession of the gospel, maintain the Protestant Reformed religion established by law, and preserve inviolably the settlement of the Church of England and the doctrine, worship, discipline, and government thereof, as established by law. While the titles obviously refer to defending the faith, which is Christianity, King Charles has always held a different opinion on which faith he will be defending. Although an old man, the evolution of the religious communities was not lost on him. How did he describe the inculcation and acceptance of other faiths in the United Kingdom? King Charles, the defender of all faiths. While the new generation has only heard stories of King Charles's propensity to defend all faiths, even though he is predominantly a member of the Anglican Church, he was more vocal about it in the 70s. King Charles had always been the type to do things differently, ranging from his takes on religion to schooling choices. For some context, the heir apparent to the throne was never allowed an education outside palace walls. But King Charles was a different kid. completely refusing the tradition of the House of Windsor, and decided to seek out his own experience with other kids in class. He was the heir, after all. Hence, he couldn't particularly be coerced into submission, so he was granted leave to attend school outside the palace walls, Gordonstoun School in Scotland, to be precise, following in his father's footsteps. Getting into the school wasn't particularly a problem. However, his parents ensured that he received no special treatment as the heir to the British throne. Instead, he was treated like all the other students, meaning that he learned to take harsh discipline, angry stare-downs from teachers, and the occasional bullying by his notorious peers at school. While this experience might have broken any kid born with a platinum spoon in their mouth, Charles was not the type. Oh, he reveled in the challenge and took the experience by storm. In later years, he explained that his experience at Gordonstoun helped shape him into a man who stood his own ground, and also joked about Gordonstoun being overrated in terms of discipline and hardship. This unique upbringing helped Charles to have more relationships with people, meeting all kinds of characters and their religious beliefs. It broadened his worldview and figured out that there was much more to religion and faith than the Catholic and Protestant churches. This newfound enlightenment created a different perspective in his heart, something almost never heard of in a prince. About 3 decades ago, he made his interreligious mindset known to the world, explicitly stating that he would be a defender of faith in general rather than a limited version of defending the faith. This comment triggered a furor, a craze, deepened by enthusiasts of the Christian faith, who just wouldn't see past their noses. To some, that was downright blasphemy, but who is accusing the heir apparent to the British throne of being blasphemous for accepting the existence of another faith and choosing to defend them all. Ever since he made this pronouncement, there have been speculations about the future, expecting the oath to be altered to something that encapsulates more religious faiths during his coronation. However, that wasn't the case. But while the oath stays the same, his actions have often depicted him more as a defender of faith than a defender of the faith. How has the popular Christian society taken King Charles's call for religious inclusivity? The cost of bridging the gap. Following the demise of the late Queen Elizabeth in 2022, plunging the United Kingdom in the dark, people found comfort in having an heir primed to be the next monarch. While his presence did the confidence of the United Kingdom a world of good, his approach to religious inclusivity and diversity raised concerns. Although it wasn't some new concept, especially since his comments 30 years ago, the Christian societies and nativists of the United Kingdom didn't think he would go through with it. But it's King Charles, a man who has always had the propensity to switch things up ever since he was a child, refusing a governess for the experience of learning in a class. As the incoming king, he knew his duties, and he was also sure of the rights his position bequeathed on him. But he might have underestimated some of the leftists of the old guard, complete nonconformists who cannot seem to look beyond traditional practices. While it is common practice to have leaders of the Protestant faith, Anglican to be precise, leading the proceedings of a British coronation, Charles wanted something different. Although he was, of course, willing to honor tradition, giving the Anglican priests power over proceedings during coronation, he had also reached a decision to include religious leaders representing the Buddhist, Hindu, Jewish, Muslim, and Sikh traditions. Rumors of this possibility bred anger and created a bit of an inside war between the religious factions. While the battles rarely relied on words, they were caught in the media. It was mostly angry stares flying across the room and more secret meetings between the religious factions in the build-up to the coronation. While they had all been invited in the spirit of inclusivity and diversity, some retreated with vague expressions of religious mantras as their reasons, or maybe even excuses. For some context, Rabbi Nikki Liss was reportedly not going to watch or attend King Charles III's coronation.
chief rabbi of the United Hebrew Congregations of the Commonwealth, about his participation in the coronation and his personal relationship with King Charles III.
He'll be doing something he considers more important: praying for the monarch on the Jewish Sabbath. Further reports suggested that he will join rabbis across Britain in reading a prayer in English and Hebrew that gives thanks for the new king in the name of the one God who created us all. While the rabbi did retreat from the coronation, some believe that he aimed a sly dig at Christians with his recent comments, in which he applauds the monarch's decision to be a defender of faiths. The rabbi claimed that the comment meant the world to him and other religious factions because their combined history hasn't always been so simple, as they haven't always lived freely, with fears of being heavily condemned by locals, mostly Christians. As expected, his comment struck a chord. Although the monarch might have been trying to create religious inclusion, has he further torn them apart? Instead, King Charles, a legacy of religious inclusion amidst controversies. At a time when religious classification has become a thing, King Charles's decision to defend all faiths in the name of inclusion was quite understandable. However, changing a theme that has recurred since time immemorial was always going to be a challenge. Although old King Charles could see the obvious divide in religious stratifications and how much it has fueled tensions not just in the United Kingdom, but all over the world. From Hindu nationalists in India to Jewish settlers in the West Bank and fundamentalist Christians in the United States, Charles is trying to bridge the differences between the faith groups that make up Britain's increasingly diverse society, showing the world that Britain is able to put groups together no matter their differences, the crux of his legacy. However, controversies have crept into the picture as new comments were rolled out recently. He claimed that he had always seen Great Britain as a community of communities, leading him to understand that the sovereign has an additional duty, less formally recognized, but to be no less diligently discharged. He believes that it is his duty to protect the diversity of his country, including by protecting the space for faith itself and its practice, through the religions, cultures, traditions, and beliefs to which people's hearts and minds direct them as individuals. While these comments were interpreted by some as good intentions from the king, others had a completely different view. It isn't news that the British royal family has been surrounded by news of serious controversies, ranging from accusations of playing a part in Diana's demise to the complete disregard of the British throne by Prince Harry and his wife Meghan Markle, who have left their duties as a working royal, and their inability to keep a lid on the consistent clash between the Muslim and Hindu youths, especially the one from last summer in Leicester. Consequently, some have theorized that the king was only trying to clean the little kinks off the image of the royal family, using his theories of religious inclusion as the perfect polish. However, others have defended his rationale. Although the main opposition Labour Party has struggled to rid itself of anti-Semitism, and the government's counter-terrorism strategy has been criticized for focusing on Muslims, Farhan Nizami, director of the Oxford Centre for Islamic Studies, has claimed that these continuous tensions underscore the crucial need for Britain to have a head of state who personally works to promote religious inclusivity. Amidst the king's explanation to a little girl about Jesus and his devotion to bringing all the religious factions together, his legacy might hinge on uniting all faiths without losing the core values and traditions that make Britain what it is. Do you think the king might have inadvertently put further division between the religious circles? Just how important was his response to the little girl from the school group? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.